All right, here we go. We're back with the Front Row podcast, Mark Gottfried, and I am fired up because a longtime friend, probably I was trying to go back in my mind and think when we met. It was probably about 1988. Yeah. I actually want to say I think I met you before you got married to Holly.
You did meet me before I got married to Holly.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
So,
what was it? The national championship was 95, right?
95.
So we probably met I'd say
89,
88,
somewhere in there.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
So I've got DJ Caruso. He is a phenomenally successful director, producer. He's navigated Hollywood. He's done some amazing movies. Some of my favorites. Number one is Disturbia. I loved it. I love Disturbia.
Thank you.
And what do we got? I Am Number 4. There's just been so many. I've read through, but every time when I was young and my kids are big movie people, they would watch a movie and they'd like a movie, I would say, guys, now I know that guy. It's from way back. But you've had an unbelievable career, and I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you and your success. And plus, you have 5 children. You got a beautiful wife, and anyway, it's been fun to catch up on where they all are and what they're doing.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. It's good to be down here in Orange County too. It's kind of new. It's new for me and a little bit new for you. And it's got a good energy. It's got a really.
Sometimes
good
I say, I miss the grunge of LA every now and then, but then I go, not really. I kind of do, but
not till you have to drop someone off at LAX, and then you're like, I don't miss Los Angeles at all.
All right, so here's my first thing I want to talk about with you, and I do this with just about every guest, and it's really fascinating to me because I even look back and. I coached for all these years, but for you growing up, and then you're from Connecticut, I think Norwalk, I read, Connecticut, and you make the journey to LA, to Malibu at Pepperdine, but, how did you get going? What was like for me, I always knew I wanted to coach. Like, I just want to coach, and I don't want to do anything else. And but like for you, what was it that motivated you or inspired you to say, you know what, I want to do that one day, and I'm going to make a run at it? What was it?
Well, I think it was like it all accumulated from childhood. So my father, I don't know if I ever told you this, my father was a hairdresser, like a really tough Italian guy who just barely got out of high school and learned the trade of cutting hair. And so he was sort of into my imagination and things like that. My mom always was pushing the dream, but my dad, since the time I could remember, maybe 3 or 4 years old, on Mondays, he would take me every Monday, because hairdressers don't work on Monday. They kind of, hair salons are closed, whatever. He'd go to the bank, he'd do his thing, he'd pick me up at school. I'd go to Mario's with him, and he and his buddies would drink a little bit, and then we'd go see a movie. So every Monday from the time that I could be like maybe 4 or 5 years old all the way to high school, I went up to my senior in high school, we saw a movie every Monday.
Wow. And
I think it was just part of seeing that and seeing that understanding, and actually then realizing that my dad was using this as his escape. Right, this was his 2 hours or 2.5 hours of escaping, and falling in love with Al Pacino, seeing Saturday Night Fever when I was way too young to see it, and all those things. It's sort of like I kind of said, like, wow, this is interesting. And then I've always had, I don't know about you because you're a coach and you can dream up a play, but my imagination, my imaginary life and scenarios were always so much more exciting to me than the reality of the situation. So I thought, if I can put together what's in my head and learn how to make movies. I didn't know I wanted to be a director necessarily, but I wanted to be in the movie business somehow. Because when you see a good movie, you're blown away and you just are immersed in the experience. When you see a bad movie, which I saw, you then start to think like, well, how are they doing this? Like, where's the camera? What's going on? Because the movie's not throwing you in there. So as a kid, I just thought I wanted to do that. And my dad said, well, you want to sell insurance, you go to Hartford. You want to make cars? Back then, you go to Detroit. Right. He said, "You want to make movies? Like you got to go to Hollywood, right?" So I was like, "Okay." So we looked at schools and sort of made the leap. And I was the first person in my family, immediate family, to go to college. And I think my aunt had gone to college too, one of my aunts. But so it was a big deal to even just to go to college. And so came out west, looked at the film schools. A friend took me out. My dad didn't even take the trip with me. He wasn't a big traveler. And then that sort of was the big leap, like, wow, this guy's going to Hollywood. He wants to be a filmmaker. It almost seemed cliche,
Were there any people, like your friends or anybody that maybe they didn't say it like a naysayer, but like, it's kind of a pipe dream? Or did you have a lot of people supporting you, like, man, go for it? Or,
I think it's interesting. What's interesting when you have these aspirations, and some people especially performers tell you what they want to do, I kind of kept it inside a little bit. And so when I was doing it, it seemed a little bit of a surprise to people. Like, wait, what are you going to do? You're going to go where? Because everyone went to Boston College, everyone went to UConn. They all kind of did their thing. Most of my friends were athletes playing hockey at Hamilton and all those things. So it was a little bit more of a surprise, but I do remember telling my story to somebody like when we were out, and I just remember this girl, I don't even particularly remember who she was, but she was just like, yeah, like, good luck with that.
I can't imagine there's a lot of people in Norwalk, Connecticut that are growing up going, I'm going to Hollywood and I'm going to make movies, or I'm going to get involved with the movie business. And you had to be like an outlier, like, okay, he's kind of over there. He's that guy.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because in our high school Hall of Fame, like the big guy on the wall is Calvin Murphy, because like he set the free throw record in the NBA. So you'd see Calvin Murphy up in the Hall of Fame. And then I'll never forget, I think it was like after Eagle Eye or maybe after Disturbia, I got put on the Norwalk High Hall of Fame wall, and I was right next to Calvin Murphy. And I thought, oh man, I made it.
Was there a movie or two when you were little? Because for me, when I love movies, I'm a big movie guy, but movies that kind of draw like some inspiration. For me, those are the ones that gets me, like something where it just kind of digs way deep in there and you go, wow, man, it just took me to another level. Like, was there anything like that when you were little, like that movie right there or that one or these two or three? Was there anything like that?
Yeah, it was sort of a combination. I do remember really relating to Saturday Night Fever because, it wasn't so much about the disco dancing. I just remember feeling like being like Tony Manero, where basically you're in this small town, even though he's in Brooklyn. And it's like you want to do more than work in the paint store. Like you want to get out. And like the symbol of him crossing that bridge into Manhattan felt like my journey into crossing. Can I make it into Hollywood? Like, do I ever get out? Like my grandfather, God rest his soul, would say like, why are you leaving your family? Like, where are you going?
Right.
You should stay here. Like, be a landscaper, do your thing. And nothing wrong with that. Right. So it was one of those things. Like, I want to be more than where I am right now. And so it was always looking out. So Saturday Night Fever was probably like, as far as the dream or something that really affected me. It made me think about what am I doing and what I want to be. And then there was one movie too, like my dad, we'd see from, the Planet of the Apes to all these movies. And then we saw Mean Streets, which was a Scorsese film. And I was way too young, but it also was the first time I realized a movie, it felt like I was sitting with my dad and his friends in the bar and listening to them talk. And it was the first time I realized a movie doesn't necessarily have to be a big spectacle. It can be about a type of person or a subculture and things like that.
So you end up at Pepperdine, and that's kind of when I met you way back. I was at UCLA coaching. You were in school at Pepperdine or had just gotten out. But why Pepperdine and why not somewhere else? Like, how did you end up at Pepperdine?
Well, what I did was there's two reasons. One was there was a tennis player named John Van Nostrand who was from Long Island, and I remember seeing him playing in some of the local tournaments. He ended up going to Pepperdine. Was a really good player. He wrote a screenplay and sold it. And I remember hearing that story. And so when I was thinking about where to go to school, I ended up contacting him and talking to him. And he was like, yeah, this is great. You should check out Pepperdine. So I came out to California. I thought UCLA, USC, or Pepperdine. Those were like the three schools I looked at. So I went and looked at all the schools, talked to all the coaches back then. We didn't have social media. Like you had to basically sell yourself and hit some balls so they can see you hit some balls, right? And so I did get an offer from UCLA to come there and could go to school there. USC was there as well. Dick Leach was the coach. But Alan Fox at Pepperdine, there was something about him. He was a psychologist, and he told me, if you want to be a filmmaker, I can tell you, why people behave the way they behave. And it's so important to understanding that, especially now that I've dealt with actors and life and all that stuff. So I really went there and I got an education from him, how to be a man, how to be responsible, how to analyze certain situations. And it was really good. And that film school at Pepperdine also was so not really structured. Like day one, I could pick up a camera. And when I was at USC, it would be, if you're gonna make a film in your junior year, and it just seemed like when you're sort of like, your ignorance, you just want to just do everything that you can right away. You don't want to see, why is this so structured? And so Pepperdine was where I ended up.
So you go to Pepperdine and you're a tennis player.
Yep.
Was there ever a time when you thought, at what point did you say to yourself, I might not be a pro tennis player, but I'm really going to kind of shift my energy over here and get involved with film.
Yeah. So when I got to Pepperdine, it was sort of a running joke. So we, back then, it's still the same. Like you have the world rankings, right? And so you kind of looked at the squad that year, my freshman year, and we had 5 of our top 8 players were all ranked in the top 500 in the world, right? And they were just still amateurs. I was like, I think it's going to be a little difficult out here. But I'll never forget, to earn my keep, there was a senior captain, and we had challenge matches on Friday, and I was like, oh man, should I be here? Could I not be here? And I just remember grinding I just sort of knew this was like the moment, like grinding as hard as I could. And we had 3 out of 5 sets, and I lost to him in the 5th set. But I think from that moment on, when everyone was watching and all the team kind of came around, like from that moment on, I was going to be on that team, and no matter what, I would be the guy who was going to scrap and fight and do his thing. And it worked out perfectly because when they would go play pro tennis in the summer, I would go do an internship at Disney.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
you kind of know your place, and I don't want to say I used it for what I needed to do, but I was aware at that point, like, tennis isn't my future, but it certainly got me to a good spot.
So here's something that's always interested in me, DJ. So everybody that, or most people that I come across who I feel like have had a lot of success in life, which I think you're obviously one of those guys. There's points in our career, and I can go back when I started coaching and different things, where somehow I created a break, I got a break, somebody helped me. And that one thing, like for me, I got hired at UCLA as a graduate assistant coach by Jim Herrick. I mean, it pole vaulted me, it sprung me to another level than if I would have been at Alabama or somewhere. And then we end up winning a national championship. So, it worked itself out. But was there a person or a time where you said, you look back now and you say, man, that right there was a pivotal move, or, I made a decision, or somebody helped me? I mean, what were those things for you that kind of elevated everything and got you, like, put you on the track where you could really take off?
Well, I think that it was so I'd gotten out of college, and I had this internship at Disney, and then that turned into a job at Disney, and I was working in production, but like basically it was called product placement, like working in the department where if Tom Cruise is in the scene, like make sure the prop guy puts a Coca-Cola thing on the table because Coke's giving $100,000. So I was just there, and I was happy to be there. And I ended up working. There was a film that was being made at Disney at that time called Stakeout with Richard Dreyfuss and Emilio Estevez, and the movie ended up being a real big success. And the director's name was John Badham, ended up coming in under budget or something crazy. So the head of Disney told me, "Hey, can you go to his house? We want to give him a gift." Okay, so they go to give him a gift. They want to give him some TV system that comes out of the roof. So just being the way I wasn't trying to kiss butt or anything. I just measured everything, did all this stuff, and presented him with the 5 or 6 options, and he said to me, "Who do you work for?" And I said, "Well, I work for Marty Katz in production." He goes, you want to come work for me? And I thought, oh, wow, this is one of those moments where you're like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? At the same time, believe it or not, I was offered to be Warren Beatty's assistant on a movie called Dick Tracy. And then even Robert Zemeckis, who had made Back to the Future, which was one of the reasons I kind of kept coming into this business. I love that movie so much. He had an assistant job. And then so what happened was, it ended up being the Robert Zemeckis assistant job was like, you're going to be more with his wife, you're going to help out the kids, you're going to be driving them around. And so what I decided was like to stick at Disney and then wait and take the John Badham job. And that was the best thing I ever did. So he was like my Jim Herrick. He was a guy who took me in, knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, and was confident enough to just sort of say, to let me learn and to say, come on. So that was the biggest decision I ever made. But it was interesting because the jobs that seemed sexier were not necessarily the ones that was going to get me there. Yeah.
But something inside that's why it's interesting. Like, I think there's always something, there's kind of this inner navigational thing that sometimes I think we don't always make great decisions, and we all, we make some errors, but you kind of make a decision because somewhere in your gut, like this one, this one's going to put me on the track maybe a little more. So there's something in there a little bit. Most people that have done, amazing things, they've kind of had those points, and they make a decision where you could have been driving his wife around.
You look back and I think a lot of people. So sometimes when people ask me for advice or I speak to a class or film school, I always tell them too, like, because I looked at my job at Disney, which was pretty comfortable, and you realize like, where is this going to take me? Like, is it going to be 3 years, 5 years? How many people get out of here? how many people work through the system and end up doing what they want to do. And I have really good friends who are really talented filmmakers who never really ever made a movie because they stayed in that executive way. And then by the time you want to change or do something, you realize, I got kids, I got this. It's a, but it is pivotal, those decisions. And I've made some good ones and like you said, made some bad ones as well.
I had an opportunity when I went with Jim at Alabama. I'd played there, and the coach, Wimp Sanderson, wanted me to be a graduate assistant and start. And they were out on the semesters, and they started school. UCLA was on the
they start late,
quarters.
Right? Yeah.
He needed a decision, and I had to tell him, and it was my coach I played for, that I'm not going to do it. And Jim at UCLA hadn't offered me anything yet. He was new, and he was trying to build his staff, and so I kind of took a chance, and and not that it wouldn't have worked out at Alabama, but being at UCLA, it just kind of it grew it so much bigger.
It was magic. It was magic.
And the way we won, so it all turned out good. So now you're, I'm kind of go back in my mind because it's been a long time since you and I visited, but the movie Bird on a Wire.
That was what
you were doing something with them when you were
that's
like
right. That's
1989-ish, 90-ish, I don't know, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's what
it was in Vancouver somewhere. No,
yeah,
is that right?
It was Vancouver. Good memory, and that was working for John Badham. That's the first movie I worked on for John Badham, and that was my first sort of diving into being on a show, on one film, on one production, and going up there to Vancouver and working up there for maybe 4 or 5 months, and that's where that's really where I learned so much, really learned so much, and I think too, as you're talking about that now, it's just going back just a little bit. I always make this note to people because the town's changed so much. So when we're talking about the 80s, 89, you probably remember, music videos were being made for $1 million. Commercials were shooting all over the place. I just remember working as a PA on these weekends in the summers and all that stuff, and there was so much activity in Hollywood. You could work and find a job. Sometimes you had to turn down a job just so you could have a day off, right? And so I remember doing that. And so getting all that experience doing that, and then finally going up to Vancouver was like sort of the first time I was with a filmmaker as like his second assistant, not even his main assistant, and just doing things. And I think it was one of those situations where I was always around, always being anticipatory. And so it was a really good learning experience. And after we worked together on that movie, it's funny enough that you say that, I got called into Mel Gibson's trailer, and Mel Gibson's assistant said to me, Mel's been watching you, and he wants you to come work for him.
Wow.
And so that was another thing. I was like, wow, what do I do? But then I realized, no, I want to be, and obviously Mel became a very great director, very successful and did his thing. But I ended up having a small crisis thinking about what am I going to do. But I ended up staying with John, and John was loyal to me, and I was so loyal to him.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
And it's refreshing because I've I've come across a lot of people in coaching. It always bothers me too that they kind of forget about the people that really helped them along the way. Because without those people, without him at some point saying, DJ, I believe in you, and yes, I want to bring you, and yes, and maybe somebody else does along the way, but he did.
Yeah, that's
he
right.
did for you, and you've accomplished some great things, but we all need help along the way somewhere where somebody says, hey, I believe, or hey, I can, you're good, or hey, I see potential in you, and it's great to hear you you can tell in your voice, an appreciation for somebody that helped you.
Yeah. And in fact, last week was his 86th birthday. So every year on his birthday, I make sure I take him to lunch. And we have lunch, and we kind of catch up and talk. Yeah, he's doing well. He was still teaching down at Chapman University too.
How about that?
Yeah, he's doing well.
So tell me about then. At some point, you kind of cross paths, or somehow or another, you get going with Steven Spielberg a little bit. And
yeah. So what happened was, worked on Burn on a Wire, worked on a movie called The Hard Way in New York. Started to shoot. What happened was John had a second unit director. Second unit is an action director that does shoot some of the action while the director is doing some of the other things, so it helps with the budget, and you kind of work hand in hand with the director. His second unit director and ended up starting to have a career as a first unit director, and so slowly but surely they started throwing me stuff like scenes to shoot and things to do. And I always think one of my favorite stories to tell is, so when we were working on this movie The Hard Way with Jimmy Woods and Michael J. Fox, John would always tell me, if I were to drop dead tonight, I want you to be able to come in and shoot the scene tomorrow.
Wow.
So I want you every night to do your homework. And I did, man. I would look at the scene, look at where it was, and where's the tables, how would I shoot it, what would I do? And I always would play it in my mind. Then I'd watch him block the scene and think, oh, I didn't do it that way, or I wouldn't have done that. Okay, that's interesting. So one day, because he had just, Burn on a Wire was going to be released, and we were shooting this movie, The Hard Way in New York. and he shot the master scene, like the big scene with Michael J. Fox and Jimmy Woods, a big wide camera. And then he did one sort of close-up, intermediate close-up of Michael J. Fox, and he called the crew in. And everyone knew this but me. And he said, all right, I have to go to the Today Show. They asked me to go on with Mel Gibson and Goldie Hawn. I'm going to the Today Show. DJ's going to finish the day. And then everyone just looked at me. They all just looked at me like your dream comes true. But then you realize like this whole crew in New York looking at you and like, all right, kid, what are you going to do, right? And then obviously he told the actor, so that was cool. So I remember everyone looking at me and I was like, oh my goodness. So wait, he shot the coverage with a 40 millimeter. It was over Jimmy's shoulder under Michael. Right. All right, let's get the 40. We'll put it on the other side. Well, I gave my first order as a director thinking people were going to laugh at me. And no, they just went to the truck, got the 40 millimeter, put the lens on, and they all started to do their thing. And I was like, wow. But that you don't find mentors like that who would just throw you in the fire and trust you, knowing that the studio is going to see this footage, thinking that he shot it. Right.
How about that?
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't
So
that amazing?
yeah, that was pretty amazing.
Tell me if you think this is a fair correlation.
Yeah.
So I remember when I was an assistant coach, I'm at UCLA, I'm an assistant coach, I shared the story before, but I remember we were at Cal one day getting ready to go to a shoot around at like noon. And I was 24 years old, and I sit with Coach Eric in the front seat, and I said, what's the biggest difference between being an assistant coach and a head coach? Not knowing, I'm trying to find all these golden nuggets of wisdom. Like, okay. And he said, lonely. And I kind of was like, well, okay. Like, okay. I'm thinking there's going to be this great, big, grand answer. He said, it's lonely. So, and then when I went from being an assistant to a head coach, you're excited, like, okay, man, I got my chance. I'm at Murray State. I'm the head coach. But then there's a part of you when you go home, you're a little bit like, oh, like you're intimidated too because it's exciting. Yeah. But now you're in the position where it's your call now. You're not the assistant anymore. Did you feel some of that now? Now when you became like the first movie that you were actually like, I'm gonna say the head coach. The director, you're the head coach would have been what? And did you feel that then?
Well, the first film that I ever really was like my full on. I did what happened was I did a short film. Yeah, here, I'll tell you the story. So I ended up doing a lot of action for John, like shooting action, blowing up houses, doing all this cool stuff. I became a second unit director, and I wanted to direct. And so what I did was I took some of my own money. And made a short film about people that were just talking, like just a real good sort of drama. And that was my first one. So that was my first time of like, this is your set. Some of it's my own money. And, people are here for the good of trying to help some young filmmaker. And that was probably the first time. But interesting, I can go back. Even nowadays when I direct or I'm on the road, it's really lonely. Like you're around a bunch of people and, you're walking in the hotel in Morocco and everyone's in the lobby and your crew's partying and the lead actor's singing on the piano and you're like, I gotta go do my homework. Like, I gotta go work tomorrow. I gotta get my game plan. Like I can't be here. I gotta make a game plan. Right. And so it's lonely that way. So directing ends up it is, and I don't want it to be like woe is me, but it's lonely. And when you're winning and things are going well, people are with you, and when you're not doing so well and your movie bombs, whatever, it's lonely. Yeah. It's lonely, And I think Kobe and Michael and all those guys, they always talk about it all the time. Like it's a big sacrifice.
It is, and it's not as easy as people think too. It's hard, and you've had, like everybody, you've had a lot more wins and losses, and you've had a lot more success. But when you've had some of those, man, I thought this one was going to be great, and it just didn't. It didn't get the momentum, and then you got some people out there. There's some nowadays this term nowadays the haters, but the naysayers, the people say maybe DJ, I don't know, that one didn't do so good. And then you have people in the media that want to critique you and blah 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 blah. Yeah. How have you dealt with some of that? Because coaches deal with it all the time, but you do as well in your business.
I think it was so funny. Early on, the very first movie I did. It was called the first movie I did, like theatrical release, was called The Salton Sea, which is kind of become a cult classic. It didn't get a huge wide release, but I had my editor and I, because Jim stayed with me for years, we'd always put up. There was one review that called me the next great neophyte filmmaker, the guy to watch. This movie's amazing. And there was another review of the movie that just said I was like a hack and copycat or whatever it was. And so like we always put that up there just to keep us like, hey, we could be great, but we need to be humble, right?
That's right.
Both sides of it. It's the same movie, right? It's the exact same movie. So I don't know. It's hard. I'd be honest. I think the thing that it's interesting. I heard Quentin Tarantino on a podcast. And it made me realize, oh man, I've been doing this wrong. because someone said to him like, "Hey, do you watch your movies?" And he goes, "Hell yeah, I watch my movies." He goes, "I make them for me, so I love watching I love my movies." And I thought, and it made me realize like I have never since the premiere of my films ever seen them again.
How about that?
Yeah, and it was like, wow, it's almost like the kid you send to college or the kid you send out in the
See
world.
what happens.
Let's
Let's
see what happens. Good luck. Yeah,
there.
yeah. So it's like it's so interesting, and so I thought one day I have to go back and just kind of watch them.
Watch them.
Yeah, and watch them. But I will say that the ones that didn't work, like for me personally, it's probably because it was the job, and it was like I thought I could put myself in the movie, but the movie didn't really allow it, and the people around. It's like you can feel why it might not have worked, or you can have like I did this movie 2 years ago called Redeeming Love that the audience score is a 98, but the reviews on Rotten Tomato are like a 12 because the critics didn't like that it was a Christian story that had a love story or a sexual thing. You know what I mean? So like you look at that and you go, but then I literally just today. Every day on my Instagram, somebody tells me this movie saved my life.
How about that?
Yeah. And even this morning, I read one that I showed my wife when I woke up because it was from Brazil or something. She just said, when I saw your movie, I was thinking really bad thoughts. And this movie showed me that, like, no matter how bad it gets, that there's light there. And she goes, thank you so much. So you go, okay, I'll take the critical bashing as long as I have that one.
No doubt.
That one thing.
Was there a movie along the way for you that you... It's kind of like naming your favorite player that you ever coach. You don't ever want to do that. But was there a movie that you said, man, I had so much fun. Like, that one was my favorite. Like, I did that. Or this one was, the cast was amazing. Whatever. Like, this, I had more fun doing that than anything. Was there a time or a movie you said, man, that one?
I would say if I had to pick one, it'd be Disturbia, just because there was a real personal element to the opening and losing someone in your life so quickly and how it turned you angry and you made some mistakes. So I really related to that, and I also the great thing about that movie was like it was discovering the new Shia. Like when Shia just he was just magic. Like take one, and everyone, the crew, and everyone felt it. So we were the smallest movie that Paramount made that year, but we made the most money. And it wasn't about making the money, but the experience of the movie. The whole experience of the movie and how the product turned out, you can feel that in that film particularly. And for me, growing up and loving John Hughes movies and like loving sort of thrillers, it was like the first time, I always thought like, why can't you have like a John Hughes movie and characters that like John Hughes, but then get to them endearing and then turn it into something that's a thriller. So to see those two things meld, and that was the first movie I made for Spielberg. And going back, you asked me about Spielberg. So what happened was I ended up doing this short film. Frank Darabont, who's my best friend in the business, who did The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile. He's just an amazing filmmaker. He had seen my short and hired me to do this HBO movie called Black Cat Run, which was the first sort of movie I did. And then Spielberg, and they had seen the short, and then that's when they kind of brought me into a television show that he was doing called High Incident. That was after the short. And I directed one episode, and Steven wasn't there in the episode I was directing, but he saw the episode, and I'll never forget this. And then I lived in Woodland Hills at the time. I think that's when I knew you. And there's a knock on the door, and I open the door, and like this person hands me this envelope, and it's like this blue envelope, and I open it, and it's from Steven saying, "Your episode was the reason I created this thing.
Wow.
Like, you put your heart and soul in this, please." So I ended up doing seven episodes of that show, and that's how I started my relationship with him.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
When you're directing, and I apologize because in my mind everything kind of goes back to coaching.
Sometimes. No, it's
so.
Very
But
similar.
in my mind, I'm coaching, and I say, I can tell you right now, in my view, what characteristics make a great player. Their toughness and their resiliency, and they want to learn. They're sponges and they love to practice. Whatever. I can go through all the things. With your career, and you're talking to some young actor right now who's just coming up, and you said, "Boy, to be great, these are the characteristics, boy." Or if you look back and say the great ones I've had, they all share the same ones. What would they be?
I think the main characteristic, particularly the young actor, guy, girl, whatever, is like you have to love it. Like it has to be in your DNA. You're not doing this to be a star. You cannot do this to be a star, because believe me, I've seen the stars, and it's pretty torturous at times. You know what I mean? That you're not doing this to be a star. You're doing it for some other reason. Like you have to do it. Like you really, like if you're going to be a filmmaker, you want to be an actor, like there's nothing else in the world that you should be doing except for that, because I'm telling you, particularly as an actor or actress, you're going to put yourself into some situations, and it's a competitive situation. Are you pretty? Are you not pretty? Look at the stars of the 70s, from Pacino to Dustin Hoffman to Gene Hackman to Roy Scheider. All of a sudden you get to the 80s and people start to have to be pretty to be movie stars. It's like, it's just, you know, there's a whole combination, but you just have to, it has to be the only thing you want to do. And even if you don't succeed, at least you tried it. But it is an all-encompassing, it's an all-encompassing activity. And also I always think too, I always tell actors, like, you need to go to the gym and work out. If you're a basketball player, if you're a coach, like you need to go work out. So what are you doing? You better be in acting class every day. You better be watching a movie every day. A good movie, bad movie, performances, because I do see it, because I see actors after actor, and some people just want to be stars. Someone told them you're pretty. Someone told them you're good looking and you should be an actor. Oh yeah, I'll be an actor. You know what I mean? And sometimes that works out. But the great ones, you know, and I've been fortunate enough to see how they all work. Some Pacino and McConaughey, I had them in the same movie together in a gambling movie called Two for the Money for Sport. That was a real fun movie. Completely different acting styles. One who tortures himself and beats himself down, to another guy who's like going to die for every ball in the corner. McConaughey, like no matter what it is, I'm going to hit the floor. What do you need, coach? What do you need? Give me a verb. I'll do something. You know, I want you to devour him in the scene. All right, I'm going to devour him. Like, you know, and so you have different things, but I think you just ultimately at the end of the day, you have to love it. Because you're putting yourself out there, and you do have to really put yourself out there to succeed. You can't like half it. You have to be very vulnerable.
I was told one time when I was young, always pursue passion, not profit. And for the most part, I think I've made a mistake here and there where, you know, the money over here, there's some money, which we all want to make money, but I've always found that those that chase just the passion, somehow it just finds a way to turn out. Not always, but you do. But if I'm just chasing the profit of it, hey, I want to make some money at this, then
you know. But and I agree that the times that I've been a little more profit orientated, it hasn't worked out as well as it should. Yeah, no, yeah, that's true.
You have done a great job. Now, this is like, again, saying a coach that loves to full court press, and now he's a full court press coach, and he really can't do anything else, which isn't true at all. And Nolan Richardson pressed, 40 minutes of hell, but people didn't realize how good he was in the half court or whatever. But he got tagged. Yeah. You kind of had had with the thrillers. You kind of got where that was not your niche, but kind of. That's where you kind of. Do you like that? Where I know you don't want to be pigeonholed in there, but you've had success with that.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where, as long as the character or the story is speaking to you, and you can put some of yourself in the story, sometimes the thriller works out. I mean, I think the most interesting thing about Disturbia was the first half of the movie plays like a comedy. And I've never fancied myself someone. I can't just tell jokes and do movies and watch that. So when the movie was playing like that and people were laughing, it scared me at first, because I thought, oh my gosh, in the very first preview, is this going to switch? Are they going to say this is two different movies? And it didn't. It just, the comedy made them more endearing. And then Eagle Eye was just a straight on, way ahead of its time movie, by the way, way ahead of its time.
Way ahead,
because that was a script Spielberg.
Little did we know.
Yeah. Spielberg was going to direct that. And he actually gave me that to direct. And so that was just it. So I think you've done the thrill. The thriller thing is there. But if you think about it, there's little movies like Standing Up that I did was about bullying, and I've always tried to put a little bit of myself into some of the movies. But it's good not to be pigeonholed. But people will, you'll always say, from the director of Disturbia, from the director, people always want to do that. So I don't know. I've always, if I love the character and I love the script, it almost doesn't matter what genre it's in.
Has there or is there an actor or actress that you have, maybe you can't say out loud, but that you haven't worked with, that in a perfect world, I want to work with that one right there, that actor or actress? I've never had a chance, but boy, I would love to work with that one. Are you allowed to say that out loud?
Yeah, well, I can say that. Well, I can tell you one of mine is gone, because Paul Newman was my hero, and I always wanted to work with Paul Newman. I came in too late, unfortunately, and he was I always said like Paul Newman, and I haven't worked with her, but I loved Jodie Foster.
Wow.
When I was growing up, so I thought I want to work with Jodie Foster. But
I had a crush on her when I was like 12 years old. That was it. It was all Jodie Foster.
Yeah, she was so good. But I will say, like, my dad loved Pacino because we saw The Godfather, and so he passed away before I got to work with Al. But working with Al was sort of a dream come true. It was almost like a manifestation. Like I look back now and I sort of believe in manifestation because this is a funny story. When I had just done Disturbia, and we did a preview, and no one knew what the movie was. We did a preview actually in Santa Ana, and the movie scored a 98 out of 100, which is, for people tell you their scores, like, but this is like the guy who doing the testing said to me, like, we've never had a movie where 100% of the females gave the movie 100. And so Spielberg was at that preview, and he looked at the card and he said, I've never gotten 100. This is Spielberg. So we went and previewed the movie again the next week, and the movie did really well, and it did exactly the same thing. Where was I going with this story? I'm trying not to brag. I don't want to brag. And so, gosh, where was I going with that? What was your question?
The actor or actress?
Yeah. The actor.
We went from Paul Newman.
Yeah. So then we kind of got that score, and the movie played so well. Oh, okay, yeah, manifestation. And so when I was young, I would always pretend that I was having a conversation with Spielberg and George Lucas, and sitting around and like dreaming that I'm going to be with them one day. And so Steven calls me up after the second preview and says, we're going to take the movie up and we're going to show it to George. And I said, oh, that sounds great. He's like, you're coming. So I go to, we're in Spielberg's screening room. We go in this private screening room, and I'm sitting there, and the lights come up because George comes in and sits down. So it's me, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg, and they show him Disturbia.
How about that?
Yeah, and then we come in after, and we have breakfast, and it was just like, it was so weird because like I was telling you about my imagination. I had done this already in my imagination, and here I was with these guys, and now I realized at the time they were looking at Shia to be in the next Indiana Jones, but at the same time it was still like something that I had pretended or in my fantasy world actually came true. So I always tell people, manifestation, I don't know. I think there's something about that.
I can remember sitting and having breakfast the first time with John Wooden. Same thing.
Right.
Same
Yeah,
thing.
you're thinking,
Mount Rushmore. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, where do you get
he's got syrup coming. We're eating breakfast. He's eating pancakes, and syrup was dripping off his chin. And I'm like, that's John Wooden over there. Like,
Yeah.
But
exactly.
That kind of thing. How much did you learn, I'm sure you did, with Spielberg? Like the learning curve, obviously, just being around him, he would do.
Well, the learning curve is that he would be like sort of the kind of producer or coach who's like, you go do your thing. You do your thing. And he let me do my thing, and then he would basically, particularly in the editing room, I realized how magical he was, because he would watch a scene and he'd see it and go, okay, this in Eagle Eye, we have like a 7-minute car chase. And he'd go back, okay, about 3 minutes in, there's a close-up of Shia, and you cut to this thing, and you cut to this light, and there's this flash of light that comes in. I'm like, what flash of light? And you go back, and it's like, oh, yeah, there is a flash of light. He's like, yeah, that flash of light confused. Can you cut those 2 frames out?
Wow.
So we cut those 2 frames, and you realize God literally blessed him, and like, this is what you're supposed to be.
Wow.
Like, there was not anything he missed.
Wow.
Yeah, not a thing. And like,
Isn't that
it was
amazing?
crazy. It was crazy. And even in marketing, he would talk. I'd see him talking about the trailers and all this thing. But the one thing that I got from Steven, and it was another friend of mine, Tony Scott, who's God rest his soul, was a great director. They're so enthusiastic. There's that childhood wonder of making a movie and the honor of making a movie that just sort of, it just comes out. It's like, this is what he has to do. And so many times it's like, oh, we're halfway through this day, it's raining, and there's so many reasons to get down. But if you really are infectious and Spielberg, to this day, when last time I saw him, he still has he's the same guy he was 45 years ago.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Talk to me about, because one of my favorites is Al Pacino. I mean,
yeah, he's the best.
I mean, there's some people, it's like players in any sport, but they just kind of they're just something. There's something else. I don't know. There's just something that says, man, they're different. And he, to me, and I'm just a guy that goes to movies and watches movies, but for me, that's one of those guys, like, captivating for me. Like when he takes on a scene, takes on a character, Scent of a Woman.
Yeah. Oh,
it's like wow. Like you just kind of go, I'm not an actor. I don't know anything about it, but man, I appreciate like, wow. It's like watching a great player go.
Yep.
I watch Kobe and you just kind of go, wow, man.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that fair with him like that?
I think it's fair with Alan. It's interesting too, because in the rehearsal process was when I really saw how he works.
Mm-hmm.
So when you rehearse and you have the script and you read a scene and you do the scene, and then let's say, you and I are sitting here in Orange County at this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and then the next scene says that we're at Starbucks having a coffee. Al says, well, Al basically in rehearsal says, well, DJ, how did we get from the podcast to Starbucks? I said, well, you guys walk down the street. It's a mile. He said, okay, let's do the scene where we walk down the street and it's a mile. What are we going to say to each other? And so you saw Matthew McConaughey look and go like, oh, okay, this is how. So Al is a fill in the blanks. Like there's no questions. Like he knows exactly. It's not just like I'm going to act like this in this scene. I'm going to act like this, and he has the whole thing figured out, whole thing laid out, and he does all of his improv is all the scenes that are in between the scenes.
Wow.
When he builds his character. So this was for me was the first time I've ever seen this in my career, and he'll always say he's not method. But he is method. Like, so when they were gambling in the movie, the scene today was they're winning. Today they're going to win a lot of money. And then so you look at the scene and the AD figured it out. And so Al would come in and the music would be cranking and Al would be all excited. And you'd be like, wow. And so you go, oh, they're going to win today. And the day that they would lose, he wouldn't talk to anybody in the movie.
Wow.
Wouldn't say a word. I have to go get him out of the motorhome. He'd be in there with the lights off, muttering to himself. And I'd have to go knock on the door and get him. And I remember one time the wardrobe person said to me, can you bring this jacket, have him change the jacket? He ate lunch, he's got food on the jacket. And I'm like, this is Al Pacino, right? So I go in there and, he's like, oh, like he was like a kid. Like for me to get him to change the jacket, he almost threw a little fit. And you realize he's such a method actor, no matter what he says he is. And he was just, but brilliant. I'll never forget. I'll never forget, because this is when I was looking at my father in heaven. I had to like sit on a curb because he said to me, DJ, I don't have it anymore, man. I'm done. And this is like 20 years, 15 years ago. And I was like, what do you mean you're done? And I literally went through his whole career and told him like this scene and this scene. And then I realized, son of a gun, he needs to hear how good he is.
How about that?
Yeah. He needs praise.
How about that?
And so I realized like I need to start great scene, great thing. How's that? You go, I got one for me. Do you want one for you? Then I realized, wow, even the great Al Pacino needs praise.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, but yeah, he's special. And like there were a couple takes you just did. There's a scene in Gamblers Anonymous where he goes in and he just rips it up and he tells them why we all gamble and why we all lose, and that's what we want. I think that was one or two takes of a spinning Steadicam, and he was just brilliant. It was like a live play, just brilliant.
Are you involved right now? And again, if you can't say, but like, is there a project right now that you're involved with that's got you excited? Like, man, this one's coming. This is going to be great. I can't wait. I mean, Yeah.
Well, I just turned in. I did a three-part docuseries for the Peacock Network on the 1990 Yankees.
Wow.
Which took me almost 2 years to make.
Wait a minute. A Met fan?
I know. Well, perfect. Exactly.
A New York Mets fan is doing a documentary on the Yankees.
Well, you got to remember, it's the worst year in the history. It's the worst year in the history of the Yankees, right? So 1990, and my whole premise behind this whole thing, Joel Sherman had written an article during COVID when there was no sports stories. He wrote like a 6 or 7 piece article about the 1990 Yankees and how they had hit rock bottom. And by hitting rock bottom, it was sort of like the phoenix rose from the ashes. They drafted Derek Jeter and like all this kind of stuff. So I thought, this is a great story. So we ended up getting an option in, and we sold it to the Peacock Network. And literally, I just turned it in yesterday.
Wow.
And I'm real excited about that. I think it's going to air in the spring. So that was a lot of work. And then there's a big movie, an action movie that I'm prepping with Vin Diesel. We're talking about doing that. And then there's another smaller little independent movie, The Strike's kind of killing that one right now, and then Angelina Jolie and I are talking about doing some things. So there's some
a lot.
There's some cool things. In my business, you have to keep 5 or 6 things going up in the air because some take 2 years, some take months, some are immediate, and things like that. Yeah.
So in sports, like college, and this is a topic for us all the time, is this new thing, the NIL. Kids can get money, whatever, blah 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 blah. But I always tell people and it would be hard for me because I'm kind of an old school. I'd have to adapt. But you do have to adapt, and you have to get with it, or you get left behind.
Yeah.
So again, I'm sitting in my living room for the last how many ever years, and now I'm seeing all these movies now on Netflix and Hulu and blah 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 and everything. And I still see some great movies on the big screen.
Yeah.
But how much has that changed for you, that whole dynamic? Or is it just the same? Hey, I'm just making a movie no matter what? Or is it the same, different?
I don't think it's the same, because I think what happened was when you start thinking about a film as content, it immediately sort of removes the art form of what we do, I think, because it's all about content. What's on the phone? What's on content? Look at all these movies on Netflix. And it's not to slight any of the movies. Some of them are great. But the theater experience, like, seeing Oppenheimer in the theater and being, experiencing that on the big screen and certain action movies. I think the sad thing is, for me, and of course you have to adapt, is like that little intermediate movie that might be a character movie. And every once in a while they might break out, but it's more apt to be seen in Amazon or Netflix or things like that. So I don't shoot the movies any differently. I approach them as if they're all going on the big screen. You mix them as they're going on the big screen, and then you realize hopefully it has a good theatrical run, but then at least your movie's going to live forever, because there's all these streaming services now. It's like it's not hard to find your movie if you need to.
Is it harder to get a movie now on the big screen?
Yes.
It's harder.
Oh yeah, it's much harder.
Because why?
Well, because when I was coming up and breaking out and doing certain things, so there was the Walt Disney Company, and they had Touchstone Pictures, and they made 28 to 32 movies a year. Warner Brothers made 28 movies. Fox made 12 or 13 movies. Sony made 28 movies. There was Lionsgate was making 15 to 20 movies. And then when the blockbusters and all this stuff started happening, they realized, like, Disney got bought by this, and they bought George Lucas. So Disney makes 4 movies now. They're superhero movies and Star Wars. That's all they make, right? And then Warner Brothers now, the contraction and all that stuff, and Universal, like, if you're not a big tentpole movie, are they going to make it for theatrical release, or are they going to feed it to their streaming system? And I think that's starting to sift itself out now, because they realize, like, well, this movie should maybe go here. And wait, did we make a lot of money? Like, I don't think they make money when the streaming services stream a movie. I don't care what they say. They go, okay, maybe 10 more people subscribe to it. Or so you spend $150 million on a Ryan Reynolds rock movie, $250 million on a Ryan Reynolds rock movie. And how many subscribers more did you get at Netflix? Or is that making the Netflix subscribers you have happy? I don't know how you quantify that.
Can it sustain itself?
I don't think, from what I understand, and I'm not a businessman, that right now it can't. It cannot sustain itself. It's going to have to. It's going to have to even out.
But when you make the movie, though, you're still making it in your mind. I'm making this movie.
I'm making it. I'm mixing it. 7.1 Dolby. It's going to go surround sounds. It's going to do all this stuff. So when you make it that way.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So I want to ask you this question. This will be a little off the beaten path, but I've kind of asked a number of people this. It's interesting. So you got 5 kids. I have 5 kids. Our kids are a little bit older now, and they're not infants any longer. But I'm always curious about this one, because I get different answers all the time. And hopefully we did do this as parents. You want to build great characteristics into your kids. You want your kids to have this or that or whatever it is. So if I were to say to you, if you could have, or hopefully you did, but parenting is, it's a hit and miss as anything there is out there. You try your best, and sometimes you just don't know how it's going to turn out, But if I could breathe these characteristics into my children, whatever they might be, 2 or 3 or 4, I don't know, what do you think they would be? You said, if I could gift my kids, if I could gift you this characteristic, it would be this. What is it?
Well, I think first and foremost, and especially in today's day and age more so than ever, it's compassion and kindness. Because I think, and then you have to have a little bit of humility, but you have to still have confidence. Like, you can have humility but be confident, because it's that fine line between what is confident nowadays, and where is that line for me? So I think I'm always like, I am so proud. And it's not always at home when you get this kindness and compassion, but I can't tell you how many people come up to me or like, your son did this or your daughter did this, and your son shakes my hand and he looks me in the eyes, and he's the only guy on this team that would do that, and say, how you doing, Mr. Smith? Or and you go, I guess I taught them that. right. You remember doing that when they're little, right? So I'm like, I guess we did teach them that. And you go, there are some great things, but I think that's really important. I think the humility and the compassion is really important, because today these kids get beat up, they get beat up, and you get lost. And I know it sounds crazy but I try spiritually to keep them, and it's hard even for myself. If you just have such a bigger picture, if you just pull out and understand the bigger picture, and then you realize that all these little isolated things are, and I think resilience, you need to have resilience because whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I believe that more so than ever. And I also believe these things happen to you so that you can be stronger. But you have to be able to get over the hurt or over the pain. So I think the resilience is something to have. And I think, unlike, my kids they weren't the best athletes, but man, they worked hard. I didn't have to, hey, where are you, baseball practice today, Dad, we just bunted all day. I'm going to go hit with Al. I'm like, oh, okay. Like never, ever having to push them, giving them give them the freedom that they can persevere and do certain things. But I do think resilience is actually important now because, everyone's so critical and it's so critical on your phone. It's so critical. It's just tough. And, oh, my poor daughter has a 3.5. Where's she going to go to school?
Right.
If I had a 3.5, my dad would probably, put me on his shoulder and spin around. It's like, yeah. So I think those are some of the qualities.
Those are great ones. I've had a great time asking different people that question because, and I've heard those a lot, kindness, honesty. Jim Boeheim the other day was great. He's just a blunt guy.
Yeah.
Good person and hard work. That's all. So that's it. But then, everybody's got something different. But and I loved what you just said because I have watched so many young people, even in coaching, that they're just not very confident, and it almost breaks your heart.
Yeah.
Like it's the timid child, that you just I want to just believe, man, and go for it. And don't be afraid to take a chance. It's like you're in Norwalk, Connecticut. And I would imagine even, you're looking at it's kind of a pipe dream, man. But I'm going for it. I'm going to go, I'm going to try. And I'm sure your parents and people around you, and there was something innate maybe in there that said, man, I'm going for it. It was like when I get out of Alabama and I'm going to UCLA. I've got a chance at that, man. I'm doing it. And then maybe I'll fail, but I'm going to try. And that's such a great thing for young people.
But you as a coach would understand this too, as a parent as well. Like you can't be overcritical. So if they do fail, you have to give them the room to fail because if I don't want to take this corner 3 jumper because if I miss it, coach is going to take me out.
Right. Take it.
If that's in your head, take it. Right. Take it. Hey, that's a good shot. So, but there are certain teachers, mentors, parents that are so critical now because I don't know. It's the same thing. You see all this club baseball, and I've been blessed, and my kids are doing well and stuff. But it's like your son throws 81 miles per hour. He's not going to go to LSU. Why are you going to a camp that you're going to spend $1,000, $1,100 on? I guess you got to follow a dream, but maybe be more realistic. Maybe you can go pitch somewhere else, and so. But you don't want to squash dreams, but you also want to keep them focused on what's important.
Well, DJ, I've enjoyed it, and I appreciate your time. I've enjoyed spending time, but man, I'm proud of you. I really am. I can remember when you were just kind of beginning, and like we mentioned, I remember you saying, I think I'm going to Vancouver, and there's this movie called Bird on a Wire, and blah blah blah, and I'm thinking, oh, that's kind of cool. You don't really know.
Right.
And I followed you, and so congratulations.
Thank you
for being on.
Good to see you. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.